Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1210, 1210, August the 3rd, 2020, Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so the past 24 hours, not really much new information coming out regarding Spygate, but there's just a couple of things that I wanted to reflect on based on things that have come out over the past couple weeks. Specifically is how it relates to the Durham investigation and what may be going on with a couple of key characters whose names have recently come out. Names that were hidden from us for a very long time. And suddenly it's okay to know who these people are after so long of going with these people being covered up. So first I want to talk about Joe Pienka. Joe Pienka, identified in the Horowitz investigation in the Horowitz IG report as Special Agent 1. Special Agent 1. Now, for a very long time, we've known about Strzok and Page and Priestep and McCabe and Comey and a lot of players, Mary Moyer and Tash Gohauer and all these various people. We've had these people's names for a very long time, but this individual, Joe Pienka, was someone whose name was kept from us for a very long time. And in the Horowitz report, he was named only as Special Agent 1. And then once his name comes out, and people go, Joe Pienka, we find out how big of a role he played in the whole Spygate fiasco. And we now know that he was really Peter's been stroking us. He was really been stroking us as right-hand man. And he did a lot of the actual doings of things on instructions from Peter's been stroking us. So we realize what a critically important player he is. Now, once his name does come out, as far as, now his name was kind of floating around there prior to that, but it was just a name floating around. We never really know what to do with it. And we didn't know what he was attached to. But once we got the Horowitz report, and we saw how much Special Agent 1 was involved, then we were able to put two and two together and say they have to be talking about this guy, Pientka. And then what happens? We find out, when people try to find out something about Pientka, they find out that he's been transferred to a office out in San Francisco. And then as soon as that becomes public knowledge that he's been transferred out to San Francisco, he gets transferred again. And now he's at some other FBI field office, and we don't know exactly where that is. At least I don't. There might be some people who do know or have some speculation on that. But at this point, we know he was sent to San Francisco, transferred there, and now he's transferred out of there. He's no longer at the San Francisco office. So we really don't know, but I don't know that that's all that important right now where he is now. But what is important is why for so long Pientka's name was sort of kept quiet, shadowed, while all these other players, no problem, we knew all their names. And now, of course, we know the key and important role Pientka played. So finally, Ratcliffe, the DNI, John Ratcliffe, releases this document week before last, which tells us that Pientka was not only in the interview where they attempted to set up Flynn, and now we know Trump as well. He was the one who not only was in the so-called counterintelligence briefing where the FBI agents went in to do the standard counterintelligence briefing back in August of 2016, as they were doing these CI briefings to the two candidates, the Right Reverend Clinton and Trump, were starting to get these counterintelligence briefings. And we know now from the document released by Ratcliffe that in Trump's case, they weren't really there to give him a briefing. They were there to observe him and Flynn, and even Chris Christie was there. I'm not sure if he was a target at that point or not, but they were specifically focusing on Trump and Flynn. They were there not so much to give Trump a briefing as much as they were there to spy on them. And we now know it was Pientka himself who gave the first part of the briefing. And we now know a much more important role that he played. So what does this tell us? What does this tell us? Everyone else who was involved at the level Pientka was involved in have either been fired or have quit. They've left the department. Gallagher's gone. Moyer's gone. Strzok is gone. Page is gone. McCabe is gone. All these career bureaucrats, they're all gone. Corton, he's gone. Go down the list. It's a long list. 30, 40 names there on that list. They're all gone. But Pientka, he's still hanging around. Still with the FBI. And he's apparently still being protected. But once these documents came out, because remember, Horowitz would never name him. Now, eventually, enough, internet sleuths and reporters and other people were able to put two and two together and say, this Special Agent 1 must be Pientka. And so we were able to put that together. And then, of course, once Ratcliffe releases this document, now we know. And we know Pientka was Special Agent 1. We know the role he played, which was a major role. He's Strzok's right-hand man. And he was involved in everything. The Rotten Reverend's so-called investigation, cover-up, pretty much everything. The coup, Operation Crossfire Hurricane, setting up Flynn, the whole 9 yards. So, once again, we get this document release, which essentially outs Pientka. So why would we be getting that now? And why is it suddenly now okay to know who Pientka is? Well, if I was to take a guess, and I think this is a fairly educated guess, I would say it tells me that they got to Pientka probably sometime right after the Horowitz report came out. My guess is someone, John Durham or someone on his crew, interviewed Pientka, and he came clean, realizing what he had done and what he had been a part of. And they probably gave him an opportunity. They said, look, we've talked to people below you who tell us you played an important role. We know you did this. We know you did that. You were involved in this. You're involved in a lot of things that were illegal. My guess is that Pientka is and has been a cooperating witness probably since shortly after the Horowitz report came out. That's my guess. Because he's still with the FBI. They're obviously still moving him around. But now we're allowed to know who he is and what he did. I don't think that document would have been released, because it's a very damning document to Pientka and Peter's been stroking us and anyone who read it. So I have to assume at this point, the most logical thing to me is that Pientka is a cooperating witness now for the Durham investigation. That would be my guess. Otherwise, I think he would have been fired, and he would be still a target of Durham's. If you ask me, I would say that Pientka has turned, and he is now a witness, and that's why he still works at the FBI, and that's why they were allowed to release that document, because he's no longer someone who Durham is interested in prosecuting, because he's cooperating. That document would have been a critical piece of evidence if you wanted to prosecute Pientka, and he would have been and should have been prosecuted for that little stunt that he played, attempting to set up the president in what was supposed to be a counterintelligence briefing. That, amongst other things that he was a part of, that would have been an important piece of evidence that probably would not have been released if it was going to be used by Durham. But apparently now it's okay to talk about Pientka, to know all he was involved in, specifically what we learned from that very damning document. So I have to assume at this point, I think the best guess is that Pientka has flipped, and he's very likely a witness now for Durham's investigation. And of course, the person right above him, his boss, would be Peter's been stroking us. And we've just learned recently that been stroking us is got a lawyer. We know he's lawyered up. We have heard that he has been talking to Durham, or has talked to Durham. So that would likely be Pientka. If you want to get Strzok, you get Pientka first. Pientka was under Strzok, worked for him. So if you look at the time frame and everything, I think it points to a very, very good guess. I would say a very good guess that Pientka is now a witness, and that's probably why they went right to Strzok after Pientka. Now, who Strzok is willing to turn on, or maybe nobody, remains to be seen. But we've been hearing these stories about Strzok writing a book, Brennan writing a book. There's various reasons why they would do this. One reason they might do it is to go ahead and they might be planning on not cooperating, and they want to go to a jury trial. You know, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a book out there giving your side of the story, particularly because, you know, a lot of people in Washington will probably buy the book, and some of those people might be on the jury. So this will be an opportunity for Peter's Been Stroking Us to do a couple of things. Number one, get in the minds of the jury that might be deciding his fate, get his side of the story out there before he's charged or indicted, because once that happens, you generally are, you know, your lawyer generally tells you to shut up. You don't talk anymore once you've been indicted. It could also be that money, could be needing some money. He's left the FBI. He's obviously, don't know if he's working somewhere or not, but obviously money's an issue, and if he's having to pay a lawyer, he's probably spending a lot of money on lawyers. I don't think they pay that much in the FBI. That Strzok's a wealthy man, so probably doing it somewhat for the money. But there's another really important reason he would be doing it, and for the same reason that John Brennan was so-called writing a book. I don't think that these guys, I don't think we'll ever see these books. I bet Strzok and Brennan will never see the book that they're talking about writing. We learned that Brennan wanted to write this book, and in order to write the book, he said he needed information from his personal notes and records. So he attempted to access them, but was denied because he lost his security clearance. So I would think that there's a much better, it's much more logical that these guys aren't so much interested in writing books as much as they are getting their hands on their records and their notes, so they'll know what it is that Durham may be looking at. It may help their attorneys to help them in their case, whether they're trying to do a plea agreement or whether they're going to go to trial. They would certainly like to have the records and notes that are going to be used against them in the prosecution by Durham or in a plea deal. So they probably want to get their hands on this information, and claiming that you're writing a book would be the reason that you would give, that you would want to request the access to your notes or records or personal papers from when you were in the government. Remember, that stuff belongs to the government, but you can access it if you want to write a book or if you're doing research for something. There are reasons you can give, which are generally approved for people who've left government and want to write a book, and they want to go back and look at their notes or records for the purpose of writing a book. So it could very, very well be that these guys are not really planning on writing books. What they really want is just a reason to get access to the classified information, their records and their notes, for the benefit of their defense, their legal defense, or to have a better idea what may be used against them in a plea deal. Because if they don't have their notes and records in front of them, and they don't know exactly, with all the notes and records that are probably out there, they may not trust what Durham's team is telling them. Durham's investigators may say, well, we've got notes and records that suggest this. And now you don't have that information, and you're not going to get it unless you go to trial and go through discovery. Otherwise, in the plea process, you're likely not going to be able to verify what the prosecutor is telling you or what they're presenting to a grand jury. So I think that I would be 50-50 surprised if either Peter's Been Stroking Us or Brennan actually get a book out. I think they probably wanted to get their hands on information which is, to Durham, it's evidence. To them, they may call it information, but it's essentially evidence is what it is. And that's, I think, what they really want. And the reason they want to give to get it is they're writing a book. That's what most people say. So I would be very surprised to see either of these guys actually produce a book. And I think it has to do more with money, has more to do with influencing a potential jury, and it has probably most to do with they want to get their hands on evidence. Evidence. That's what's on their mind right now. Not writing a book. probably not in a state of mind that they want to sit around and write a book. Right now, they're probably worried a lot of the time about what's going on. They know what they did. They know Durham's all over it. And they know they're likely, especially these people, the Brennans, Strzok's, people like that, they know they're in the crosshairs. I doubt they're sitting around, you know, in a sort of an fanciful way, daydreaming about writing books. I think their minds are on some more serious issues. And I think what they're interested in right now, mostly, is how to defend themselves or how to be best represented, whether it's a plea deal or taking a case to trial. Right now, having that evidence is probably what they really want. But yes, that's my thoughts on Pientka, and I think a lot of the same may be true with Bruce Ohr. Bruce Ohr, I think, was probably cooperating a long time ago. There was no one for him to cooperate with until Durham came along, really. But I imagine he was interviewed a long time ago. He's still at the DOJ. I heard he's been demoted twice, but he actually got a pay increase. So I'm not sure what's going on with him, whether he and Nellie Ohr will face any problems. But, you know, I think Bruce Ohr probably was, as my understanding, he was pretty cooperative back before when they were interviewing him, and he apparently was fairly truthful when he was interviewed by Congress. So it's very likely that Ohr is a cooperating witness as well. And I don't think that Ohr has any great information that would tell us anything we don't know. But he's someone out there that certainly we brought in as a witness in a grand jury trial. He's not going to be the guy who gives you the major drop. He's just going to be another witness that corroborates things that you already have. So I think that he's probably a cooperating witness. Nellie Ohr, I'm not so sure. I don't know. They may have copped a deal together. So I'm not really sure about Ohr, but I think it's a similar thing. Because remember, most of all these other people have been fired or quit. But Ohr and Pientka are two people who are still around. And it tells me that they're probably cooperating witnesses. Now, let's talk about Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele, he's got a lot of problems. Let me tell you some of the problems he has. As the pressure is applied to the coup plotters, the Spygate plotters, he is the most obvious one that you would throw under the bus. I mean, if you're McCabe or Strzok or Page or any of the people at the FBI and DOJ, he's the obvious choice for the person you want to throw under the bus. His credibility has obviously been questioned already. His so-called dossier now has already been blown up and exposed to have been a fraud. And if you're Strzok or Page or Pre-Step or Comey or any of these people, you're going to go, you know, we made a big mistake. I admit we made a big mistake. But we were acting honestly. We weren't doing anything criminal. We made a mistake. We trusted Christopher Steele. We thought he was telling the truth. Former MI6, got this intelligence business. He's worked with the FBI before. We're told he's got these wonderful credentials. We should have checked him out more instead of taking his word for it. Our mistake, our bad. But we had a lot of things going on. Time was of the essence. We had to move on these things. We went ahead. We eventually did find out that what he was telling us wasn't true. By then, it was later than what it should have been. We'd already gone for a couple warrants. We'd already done a few things. But it was our bad. We made a mistake. We committed no crime. We just made a mistake. It was Christopher Steele. He's the one that lied to us. And there's where Steele has a lot of problems. Because he, as a paid informant of the FBI, he was made 13 payments by the FBI as an informant. He knowingly provided false evidence to the FBI as a paid informant. And that's a crime. It's a big crime. Especially in this case. So if you're in the FBI, you're Strzok, Page, Pre-Step, McCabe, any of these guys, Comey, Brennan even, probably Clapper, everybody's going to point to Steele. Steele's the guy they're going to throw under the bus. Watch and see. Steele is the guy these guys are going to try to scapegoat. He's got a lot of problems. And he's still not telling the truth. You remember, at first we were told that he was relying on collectors who used intermediaries who went to their sources. And that he wasn't out pursuing the information, it was coming to him. The information was just flowing into him. He wasn't out looking for it, wasn't out pursuing it, never ever talked to a single source. He relied on collectors who went to intermediaries who had sources. Now we know that's all bullshit. The new narrative is that he had one primary subsource who had 5 sources, if you include a 10-minute phone call with someone that they couldn't even identify as a source. I don't believe that either. We still haven't gotten the truth. But what else did Steele tell us? Because that's the second story. The first story, collectors, intermediaries, sources. That just sort of dissipated into the ether. Once the Horowitz report comes out, now, that's not true anymore. Now he had one subsource, and the subsource had 5 sources. New narrative. But wait a minute. Christopher Steele met with Kathleen Kvalik, a State Department official. A meeting set up by Jonathan Weiner. And what did he tell Kvalik? We know because she took notes. And we've seen the handwritten notes. They're public. And she said that Steele told her that he had 2 Russian sources. Trubnikov and Sarkov. Trubnikov and Sarkov. One, a former high-level intelligence official in Russia, and the other, a current high-level intelligence official in Russia. That's what he told Kathleen Kvalik. So first, he doesn't know any of the sources, doesn't talk to any of the sources. He's not out looking for information that's flowing into him. He's using collectors, using intermediaries who have sources. That's what we get for 2 years, 2.5 years. Then the Horowitz report comes out. Now all of a sudden, narrative flips. It's one subsource who had 5 sources. Then what about the meeting he had with Kvalik, where he specifically told her he had 2 Russian sources, Trubnikov and Sarkov? What about that? Did everybody forget about that? I didn't. Who do we know does have a relationship with Trubnikov and admitted it to Papagalopoulos? And we actually know that he invited Trubnikov to Cambridge 2 times in 2016 to speak at seminars and brags about his relationship with him. The fat man, Stefan Halper. He just seems to pop up all the time, doesn't he? Every time we find a hole, some place we need to fill in, some missing piece of the puzzle, when that piece of puzzle finally is discovered, it's Halper. He was also a paid FBI informant, right? Who else was he working for? Because the FBI says that they had no activity, no informants until July 31st. But Halper was active with Flynn back in 2014. He was on to Carter Page in 2015. And he was on to Papagalopoulos in 2016. I'm still not buying this primary subsource. There's something going on there that just doesn't work for me. Doesn't add up. I think they're still lying. They're still covering up. You know who I think Steele's source was? Halper. Don't know if he was directly feeding Steele or feeding him through Confusion GPS or feeding him through another third party. I think we're going to find out that most of the crap that Steele put together came from Halper. And Danchenko is just a guy hard up for money that was willing to play the role, willing to be the actor. He's got immunity. Checks the boxes, even though we know he hasn't been to Russia in 20 years. He's Russian. I think Halper was Steele's source. We always find out in this story, when we finally get to the truth, we always find out that the key players were not outside players, Russians, or anything like that. They always turn out to be an inside player. Someone in the cabal. Not outside the cabal. All the people outside the cabal appear to be ghosts. They can't corroborate anything. They can't be found. They can't be located. Like misfit, people like that. Or they're just out there like ghosts, like Halper. Halper's getting paid an awful lot of money. He's connected to a lot of the people who are inside players. And he was close to Trubnikov. And admitted to it. Bragged about it. And Steele said his two sources were Trubnikov and Sarkov. The only connection to Trubnikov and Sarkov that we're aware of people in this inner circle, in the coup plot, is Halper. Did Steele really F it up when he dropped Trubnikov and Sarkov's name to Kathleen Kavalik? I think he did. I surely think he did. Let's wait and see what Durham finds. We also had these two characters, Brian Alten and Stefan Soma. Two other ghost characters who we were never able to talk about or ever have their names, or always were blacked out. We know about Strzok, we know about Page, we know about McCabe, we know about Priestep, we know all these names. Moyer, Gauhar, Corton. We got all these names of all these top tier players. These guys were top inside guys. Just like Pientka. Very much as much an inside player as all the rest. But we couldn't know about him. Same with these two guys, Brian Alten and Stefan Soma. Alten identified in the IG report as Senior FBI Intelligence Analyst. And Stefan Soma, Case Agent 1. Both out of the Southern District of New York, Operation Crossfire Hurricane Team. Both of those guys' names kept quiet. Both these guys covered up for a very, very long time. Then all of a sudden, document releases, and we're now able to place their names. And if you're Durham, remember, Durham's way ahead of us. You know, he's known who these guys were for a long time. Probably within weeks, if not just a couple months after beginning his investigation. All we were seeing with these guys was blacked out names. Durham's not getting redacted documents. He's getting documents he can actually read. The names, the dates, the places, the people, the whole 9 yards. So he would have known about these guys a long time ago. And they were all three key players. Pientka, Alten, and Soma. All three very key players. It was Alten and Soma who went back and interviewed so-called source number primary subsource of Christopher Steele 2 times in February of 2017, at which point they knew the entire dossier story was a hoax, was a joke. They knew it. Yet, the information they gathered didn't change the behavior of the FBI. They, in fact, or DOJ, they doubled down. And everyone else who's part of the plot doubled down. So the question that Durham probably had for these two guys a long time ago was, okay, I just read through this interview you did with this primary subsource. He basically blew up the entire dossier. Who did you tell? I mean, you're working on the Crossfire Hurricane team. Did you share it with the guy running it, Strzok? And the DOJ official overseeing it, McCabe? And I'm sure these two guys are going to say, well, of course. Of course. I mean, that our notes from our interview certainly would have gone to our superior, and it would have gone up the chain. Would have gone all the way up to Comey. At least. Maybe higher. So yeah, they all had to know. And he's probably going to say, well, at some point, why didn't you stop it? You guys have blown this thing up. Yet you allow this to continue 2 more FISA warrants on Carter Page, a Mueller investigation, and you just sit back silently and don't say anything? Looks to me like you're part of a corrupt plot. You knew about a fraudulent investigation you allowed to go forward. You knew about fraudulent evidence that you allowed to be used to acquire 2 more FISA authorizations on an American citizen. You guys are in a lot of trouble. But now we're allowed to know their names. And now we're allowed to know they're the 2 guys who did the interview. And we're allowed to know that they were part of Crossfire Hurricane. And we're allowed to know anything we want to know about them. After all that time. So my guess, and this is exactly how these investigations work, you start on these players here. And you work your way up. So that's why I believe that Pientka, Brian Alten, Stefan Soma are all now cooperating witnesses for Durham's investigation. I expect that all 3 of them will sign plea agreements, plead guilty. And they'll probably get some minimal charges. They may not even get jail time if they give up a big enough fish. Or cooperate well enough, they might not even have to go to jail. Probably have to pay some fines or what have you. But they're looking to save their skin. But the information these guys have could implicate all these people above them. Which would be Strzok, Priestep, McCabe, Comey, Yates, Moyer, Gauhar, Laufman, and all those people in that tier. And I think those have to include Brennan and Clapper. I mean, certainly they would have had to have learned about this as well. I don't think this would have been kept from them. Comey certainly would have shared this with them. I mean, they had just used this information to put it in the ICA, Comey and McCabe. According to these intelligence officials that were interviewed by Durham, they said, nah, man, we weren't down with it. But Comey and McCabe were pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. I think that Pientka, Alten, and Soma are now cooperating witnesses for Durham. Will likely be 3 people we will hear of somewhere in the next few weeks, somewhere around Labor Day, that have signed a plea agreement admitting their guilt, and they are now working with Durham to implicate the other perpetrators. That's what I believe we're going to see. I believe there might be a couple more along with them. And I believe that Steele, Christopher Steele, is going to be the guy that gets scapegoated by all the people that Pientka, Alten, and Soma are going to implicate. I think that they're going to point right at Steele. We trusted Steele. We believed him. We didn't do anything criminal. We probably didn't exercise due diligence. We made a mistake. Errors were made. Mistakes were made. But it was our intention to do the right thing. We just got duped by Steele. Then the heat will be on Steele. And he's going to be looking to save his butt. And he'll dump on everybody. He'll say, no. The FBI knew everything. They knew everything. I told them everything. And besides, I was working for Hillary Clinton. And if they ever find out who his real source was, I don't think it's Iggy. Iggy the drunkard. No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Iggy doesn't know Mr. Trubnikov. Halper does. I think we're going to find out that Halper was Steele's informant. And then that will blow up the FBI. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you. Bye.